Welcome to another new episode of the Get Organised with Decluttr Me podcast with myself, Shelina. I hope you're well wherever you are in the world. Today, I have a special guest, Carina Harvey, who is a professional coach, speaker, and a fierce advocate for embracing change and creating fulfilling lives. In this episode, we're going to deep dive into Carina's incredible journey from working in HR to becoming a style and identity coach. We'll explore how she combines personal development with style coaching and how major life transitions, such as career changes, can impact one's sense of identity and self-expression. Carina will share her unique approach to helping clients rediscover their authentic selves, balancing the inner work of confidence building with the external aspects of fashion and style. We'll also hear about the challenges her clients face during identity realignment and how businesses can support employees through these shifts. Welcome, Carina, to the show. I'm so happy for you to be here today.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for having me as well.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. We're looking forward to this conversation today. So you were first in HR. So what inspired you to go from HR to a style and identity coach?
Oh, good question. So I guess, my corporate career spanned 15 plus years. We will just say plus.
Yeah.
And I actually did a number of things throughout that time as well. So I moved from recruitment and sales where I'd been for a number of years. And then I transitioned into HR and into talent roles and project roles. And so kind of done a lot of everything anyway throughout my corporate career. And so I guess change has always been quite familiar to me in that sense. And then I think towards the latter stages of my career, I think I always knew that I was going to go off and set up some kind of coaching business. I talked about two things. I talked a lot about styling and I talked a lot about coaching because I've been involved in delivering coaching programs, designing coaching programs in the corporate space. So it always seemed like quite a natural transition.
Yeah.
And then I started to study various different forms of coaching. And one of the certifications I took before I left corporate was a life purpose coaching certification. And so I'm a qualified life purpose coach as well, along with many other things too. But it was through this really that I started to really gauge some of the passions and the interests that I'd never really done anything with throughout my life. And one of those was the styling. So yeah, that's kind of what led me to then studying styling. And then I went off and worked as a stylist. And it was really from there that I was thinking, right, how can I build out a coaching business around this? And the more people that I would talk to that would come in for style advice, the more it became very clear that I think some people would come in for styling advice because they just wanted to, how to dress themselves. And, it was something that they'd rather kind of hand over. But for others, it was more meaningful. It was almost like they'd gone through this kind of change. Like there were a lot of new mums that I was talking to, or a lot of people that had career transitions and gone through relationship breakups and stuff like that. And so it was really clear that there was also a lot more going on from a psychological perspective as well. So life purpose is really trying to understand your life purpose essentially. So it's building on a number of different factors. So, looking at your passions, looking at your interests, looking at the skills that you've built up over the years. So what you might have done in the workplace, but also understanding like where your natural talents lie. What are the things that your friends would say you're really good at? Then, thinking about the things that you're truly passionate about as well. Where do you want to add value? How do you want to change someone's life if you want to change someone's life? And then also assessing that based on need as well. So actually going out and thinking like, if I was to go out to market, how could I apply that and turn all of that into something that somebody would need, essentially?
So something like what I did then, without realizing it.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of us do it without realizing because we go through these transitions and naturally all of these thoughts form is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But sometimes we need just a little bit more guidance, or you actually know it, but you just need that kind of that steer and that clarification, really.
Yeah, I wish I'd had that when I started because I did I started the same because I was a lawyer and then I became a professional organizer.
Course.
So it was the same. It's like, it was my purpose to do this, but there wasn't a name for it like 11 years ago or 11 years ago. So no, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So you talked about like major life changes, like breakups, motherhood, and career transitions. But
Mm.
how do they impact people's sense of identity and their style? What have you found? Like with a breakup, like what have you found
Mm.
with that?
I think a few things really. I mean, fundamentally, when we go through a life change, it changes us as a person
Mm,
more often than not in some kind of way. It changes our priorities, it changes our values, but it can also really shake our belief system as well. Now, depending on how much we understood those things in the first place, it could have a greater degree of impact to the individual.
yeah,
So I think every time someone goes through some kind of life change, having the skills to understand how it's actually ultimately how it's affected them and how it's impacted them and how it's changed them is a good set of skills to have, because we're going to continue changing and evolving all throughout our lives.
yeah,
If we've never really been in a good place with that, every single time something happens, we're moving further and further away from our core identity.
yeah.
And knowing our core identity is so, so important, because it literally drives everything we do. It channels us in the direction that we want to move. And it's similar going back to the whole life purpose as well, right? So we know what's important to us. We understand what our life objectives are.
Yeah.
We have that sense of self-love, that sense of self-worth. We can go out and we can do these things without any kind of challenge. But when all of that is up in the air,
Yeah.
it's really, really hard to kind of get a grip on all of that, really.
And so, like, when you say core identity, what do you mean by that? Like, what is that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think so. I always say core personal identity, because there's obviously a lot now that comes into identity, but I always say core personal identity. So it's understanding who you truly are. So who you are, like your almost think of it like your soul.
Right.
Who would you be authentically? If you were to put yourself out there every single day, what would you stand for? What are your values? What matters to you?
Okay.
How does that person therefore speak? How do they conduct themselves? How do they talk? But also their belief system as well. So I'm an NLP coach, and a lot of what we talk about and a lot of the things that we work with is all related to our belief system, because our belief system will literally govern everything in terms of how we feel, our emotions, which ultimately leads to our behaviors and our choices and everything that we do.
Right.
So this is what I mean when I talk about personal identity.
That's so interesting. Like, yeah, you hear these terms, but you just don't know. You just don't put two and two together. So it's good to know and understand what it is. Um,
Yeah.
so what are the kind of common challenges your clients face when rediscovering I can't speak, rediscovering their personal identity, especially after a major life change?
Yeah. I think for most people, I mean, certainly it's that feeling of utter loss and despair, and it's confusion. When we go through a life change, and if we haven't pieced together everything that's going on with us, and there's the common tendency as well, and I myself have been very guilty of this all throughout my life, is to kind of pick yourself up, and it's not necessarily out of a negative need, but actually it's positive. We want to drive ourselves forward, and we want to say, we're over this life change or whatever has happened to us. And fundamentally we're not. So then what happens is that we suppress everything that's really going on. We suppress our emotions, which is really, really damaging, because it means that we don't then process our emotions,
Yeah.
and they can then resurface later on down the line. But also we don't really assess how we've changed as a person. So like I say, it could be that our values have shifted. I've worked with somebody who was cheated on, and their trust has changed. Now, if they don't work on that, then how do you then go out and forge relationships going forward? You don't. You base everything on the experience that you've just had. So being able to sit down and really understand, first of all, acknowledge that something has gone on and that you need to kind of work on yourself and carry out that inner work, and
Mm.
then just go through the necessary steps to be able to do that. So people come to me for all sorts of different reasons, but I guess, commonly is that feeling of loss, because if you haven't acknowledged it, you've carried on going, then you've probably got to the point where suddenly you just feel so confused and you feel so lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it's trying to work out, what has gone on, and how can we rebuild that? How can we rebuild that understanding and that kind of self-confidence and self-belief?
I think that's the key thing, the self-confidence. I mean, I've gone through a major breakup, and it's been months, but it's still, there's moments that it comes up again, and
Yeah.
I've tried to do the work for myself. But yeah,
Oh,
that
I'm so
those
sorry.
falls come. Thank you, but it comes, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
you think you're getting better, you think you're being moving on, but there's still things that come up that you've sort of, you don't realize that you've suppressed, but
Yeah.
you have, So,
Yeah.
no, this is very apt for me right now.
Yeah. I think
I
it
love
happens to all of us as well, because I
Yeah,
think there's little parts of everything that we've gone through that, we feel like we've done all of the work, but then we get challenged in a slightly different way by something. And it's that challenge that then tells us, oh, actually, there's something else that we just need to go back and work on. And that's fine, because I always say to everyone, it's, this is life, right? We'll continue to work on ourselves all throughout. So, that's why I say these are really important skills to be able to build.
yeah, yeah, it is completely. And like, you know, I think it's become more of a thing to think about and talk about and to do and to get the help that's needed. Because when I was in my
Mm,
20s, there wasn't a thing to, you had a breakup, you just dealt with it, stopped crying. And
yeah.
then I think Sex and the City came out and it was like, oh yeah, great, we got that to refer
Yeah.
to, which was not healthy. But
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, this is, it's so useful and so helpful for people. Um, and how do you, balance like this inner work of, confidence building? Because I think that's a big thing for people that gone through major life changes or traumas or whatever. I
Mm,
mean, like even for myself, to build that confidence again, to go out in the world, how do you do that? And especially, let's put in the, you do the fashion and style as well. How do you help the people to build their confidence with that as well?
yeah. So I always think that so, when we're stuck with something, when we feel uncomfortable with something, and I think now in particular, there is a tendency to talk a lot about the mindset piece. You just need to change your mindset. You just need to build your mindset, become
Yeah.
more confident, you'll be fine. It's absolutely true, you do, but then there's other work that you need to do as well. And usually it comes down to those kind of beliefs.
Right.
And it can be really hard because we need to look very, very hard for them as well. I'll give you an example of a client that I worked with on more on the styling side, actually. But it was interesting how a lot of the coaching we did then became very impactful in other areas of her life as well.
Right.
We worked through some childhood trauma in relation to groups of friends that she would have when she was younger. And we had to work quite hard to get to the bottom of this. But in actual fact, it was something that had really impacted her when it came to her style and image. So it was something that we worked on to begin with. But then in actual fact, it was something that was still impacting her in many different social groups as well. So it is really interesting how when you actually go to the root cause of something, can see how then it replicates itself and it creates these different patterns in other
Right.
parts of your life. And so there's two things that we then did. So first of all, we worked on the belief itself, where it came from. And really with that, you're trying to reframe and to try and understand why you took away what it is that you did, but actually then to rationalize with that and say, look, I can understand how you got there, but maybe there is a different way of looking at it. And maybe it's not the belief that you've then carried forward. But
Mm.
then it's also about introducing little bits of action as well, because we have to couple mindset with action.
Yeah.
So for her, we then introduced just tiny little tasks in terms of her going out and styling herself by herself as
Right.
well, so
Yeah.
that she can build the confidence through the action as well. And again, a lot to do with coaching is understanding that not everything is going to be perfect as well. So I said, you're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
go out, sometimes it's not going to go well, or you're not going to find what it is that you're looking for, but other times you will. So it's kind of pairing all of those different things together, really.
And so what was wrong, because I mean, I got bullied at school a lot and I have memories of
Same.
school. So what was, I mean, without saying too much about her, but like the style, like what you were saying, like, how she was, dressing and stuff, like how was that
Mhm.
linked to what was she doing or what was she behaving? Because I'm sure there's listeners as well hearing this going, am I the same? Like, do I have the same
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah. I think so. Without getting too much into her story, I think I can actually talk about my own story as
Right.
well. Now, everyone knows me as an adult who's always been very interested in fashion, and I like trends, but I like to introduce my own quirky sense of
Yeah.
style. And I definitely don't think that that was the case. And I think I was bullied quite a few times in my younger years. And it wasn't even that people said anything outright to me about my style or how I dressed, but it was more the fact that I wanted to fit in. So
Right.
I always used to feel like I was bullied for being the odd one out, essentially, because I did. I came from quite an unusual family setup and all that kind of stuff. So for me, something that I carried forward initially in my style was probably not wanting to be too edgy, too out there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wanted to break the mold. And actually, that's been me very much all throughout my life in so many different ways. But then all of a sudden, I had this moment when I got into my 20s. And I think it must have been my overarching passion for clothes and, everything fashion related
Yeah.
that kind of threw all of that up in the air for me. And I broke free of that. But it is really, really common. And the reason I explain my set of circumstances is because sometimes it could be something that somebody has said specifically
Mm.
about, what you're wearing. Other times it could just be a need to wanting to fit in. And then you feel like you don't have the confidence to wear what you would really wear.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
could be many different things really.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, same, had the same things. And like,
Yeah.
and it was the 80s, so there was terrible fashion out in that time. And you couldn't, my mum and dad used to buy from CNA, so we used to have so many CNA clothes, and the cool girls would wear from Tammy Girl. I can't believe I remember
Oh, yeah,
that.
I remember that as well. Yeah,
And there was
yeah.
another one. There was another fashion. They would buy from there or steal from there in the, at the Howard shopping center. And like,
Yeah.
but I was buying from CNA, and it was like, and just traumatic. Even now I see CNA in Europe and I'm like, oh, the trauma.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's the things that stick with us as well. I remember my mum used to put me in like really stupid stuff. I had like a knitted jumper that had a rabbit on it and stuff like that. And
yeah.
and so and I don't even remember really being picked on for that, but I'm surprised.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's little things that kind of stick with you, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. But people are like, kids are cruel. I think they're crueler now because of social media as well. But they were
Yeah.
horrible when we were young. Like if you weren't well off and having nice things, then it was the end of the world. But oh
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah, the things we've gone through. And so let's talk about mums, because mums, they have the kids, they might have had a career before and now they're going back onto the workplace. How do you work
Mm,
with them? Because that's a big thing, I find, especially with my clients, when I'm organizing their
yeah.
closets, that they have clothes, mummy clothes, and now they
Mhm.
need, work clothes, and they feel, what's it, frumpy and stuff like that as well, don't they? There's that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's kind of two elements to that really. So I think, some of the mums that I've worked with are going through that transition
Yeah.
from a body image perspective. And of course, that's very challenging as well because you're going through the fact that your body has changed essentially.
Hmm.
And sometimes we just want to go back to that old version of ourselves. Um, Everyone that I speak to who's gone through any kind of change, by the way, I'd always say, you're not going to go back to that version
No.
of yourself because in actual fact, you're a more enhanced version of
Mm.
that person,
Yeah, yeah.
And I would say that to a mum who's going through that kind of body change as well. And it's all about, appreciating your body and building up that level of love and respect and appreciation for everything that your body has
Yeah,
been through
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. But I also think, I've spoken to mums who feel the need to dress differently, when they
Yeah.
become a mum and to kind of step into a mum type of wardrobe. And I think Yeah, I think that means something different to everyone, right? So I think if you're dressing to fit in with everyone that you see at the school gates, then I would say, no, don't do that. Dress how you want to. The key things, and I just introduced an online coaching course as well on, it's a combination of understanding your style, building out your personal style, but also developing your relationship with styling as well. So building a strong mindset towards styling. And a lot of what I talk about is being able to inject your personality into your styling, but at the same time, making sure that it's lifestyle appropriate as well.
Yeah.
And, thinking about all of the different parts of your life that you need to kind of build your style out for so that you feel comfortable throughout the day. So taking into combination all of those things really. So yeah.
It is. Yeah. Sorry, my cat's just
clawing
me. I love him, but he's clawing me. So I'm not making faces at you, it's me.
I just saw the camera move and I was like,
he's down here just driving me insane. But yeah, like I've seen that, the mummies with they wear the gym stuff like the Lululemon kind of thing, and then they wear that and all the flowy dresses, and then it's like they have to go back to corporate and they're like, I mean, you could still wear the flowy dresses, I guess, couldn't you? But with a blazer.
Absolutely.
But it's how to, help them get through that kind of change, isn't it? That, and the mindset. And I always say, that most mums, except for my best friend and my sister-in-law, most people's bodies change, so their hips are different, so they can't fit into the jeans they could fit in like before. It's just not going to happen. They have to buy different kind of jeans. And so you also talk about identity realignment. What is that, and what are the common challenges that clients face with like identity realignment?
So I think, whenever we go through a period of looking at our identity and understanding ourselves, then I guess what comes with that is increased awareness, essentially. So if we increase our awareness about ourselves, then the likelihood is that you're going to have more confidence and you're going to have more, you're going to be more assertive in what it is that you want. So again, I can speak from personal experience, and then I've seen clients who've gone through this as well, and they kind of get to the other side and there's an increased level of awareness that kind of shines a bit of a light on different parts of your life, essentially. So, with that, it may well be that, and I wouldn't necessarily call this a challenge, but I guess it is of sorts, is that you might feel that certain parts of your life no longer work for you as you would like them to.
Right.
But I also think that that's a good thing, because that's where your authenticity comes in, right? So, and it's very telling as well when a client first comes to me, and I have like an authenticity assessment as well as part of the beginning part of the coaching process.
Right.
And usually there's significant areas where someone scores quite lowly in that. And that tells me that they're living out of alignment with themselves. So it's about working with those particular areas. And then when you do actually understand yourself a lot more and you empower yourself with that level of self-worth, then suddenly there's certain parts of your life where you're no longer happy to just settle for what was. So I guess you see it as a challenge, because obviously then there's an element of actually needing to deal with that. But at the same time, it's a challenge that you'd rather have in the long run, I think. So yeah.
But do your clients realize that they need to, they do the assessment that they need to change the alignment? Are they, I suppose when they come to you, they're ready to change, or are they sometimes reluctant about it?
I think no one really wants to change like wholeheartedly. No one sits there and says, that's it, 100%. I'm ready for change and everything that comes with it at first, because it is very frightening. And I think when you lose a sense of yourself as well, you don't really understand what changes ahead, because you can't possibly really understand. And so that's why we go through some of the assessments at the beginning to really understand, okay, what are the parts that we really, really need to concentrate on, and what are the parts that we need to work through.
Right.
And I think when we talk about, then potential outcomes and results as coming from that, then, someone can start to see the direction that we're moving in, and making sure that it's in line with their original objectives as well. Because someone will always come to me, and what we do is we go through an exercise of working through objectives,
Right.
and then we go through an element of the work, and then we revisit those objectives as well, just to make sure that we're still on the right track. So,
right.
yeah.
Unless they change, or do they change their objectives while they're going through the process as well?
Sometimes it's more of again, the word realignment. Sometimes it's a bit more of a realignment. Sometimes it's a bit more of a detailed understanding of exactly what those objectives are.
Right.
I've worked with someone this year who is going through a career transition. Actually, I've worked with a couple of people who've gone through this, but I'm thinking of one person in particular. But and at the very outset, they weren't sure exactly what that was going to look like. But the more we continue to work, the more we kind of drill down on what exactly that objective is going to look like.
Right.
So it's something, it can evolve, but it can become more of a kind of detailed and specified objective as well.
That's really interesting. And I think that's really useful for a lot of people. I mean, I have a friend who's going through that right now and trying to decide what she wants to do next.
Really?
And just, and it's like, we've discussed it. We've done mind maps while we've been having dinner and stuff like that, and gone through it. And, I can see what she would be amazing at, but it's her building her confidence to see that she could do this or do something else. And it's difficult for people, isn't it, to sort of find that place. I think it's overwhelming for people as well, isn't it, to have that thought process.
And again, that I would say comes down to the self-beliefs as well. So I think maybe there's something going on with regards to her belief system that's kind of holding her back in that sense. It depends if she has a clear idea on what it is that she would like to do. If she does, then I would say definitely, if she hasn't moved forwards, it's 100% down to the beliefs. If she's still a little bit, confused by exactly what that outcome's going to look like, maybe there's some work required on that too, because you've got to have that ultimate passion. You've got to understand your why if you're going to change careers. That I don't tell you that, right? But also then you need to understand if there's something going on with the, her beliefs as well. So maybe it could be a combination. But
I think it's a combination. But I'll be seeing her this week, so I'll talk to her about it. But I think
we'll have a chat. But
it definitely needs. There's definitely a few things, but I think it's a lot of confidence. I think she lacks the confidence and taking that step, Whereas with me, I was just crazy. I was just like, I've had enough. I hate working with these people. I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I'm gonna do something new. And nobody knew what I was talking about when I started, so that was great. So,
but it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you look back now, I'm going to ask you a question. Like, did you feel confident in doing that, or you just thought, I'm just going to do it? Like, how to do?
I was really blind. I was just went like a train, and I think about it in hindsight. I was worried, a bit scared. I think my parents and my brother are more worried because we're all corporate people. But I was like, no, I can't take this anymore. But I came up with the idea in March and I didn't quit until September. So I saved a lot of money before I quit completely. But I was just like a bull in a china shop. Is that what they say, the phrase?
Yeah.
I was like that. I was just like straight on. Yeah. And then I started and I went, why? Why? But it's
but look how it turned out as well. It's amazing.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, nobody understood what I was talking about when I started because I was the first in the Middle East. So everybody was like, "Shoo, what is decluttering? What is organizing?" And now it's like, it's cool. But you must have had the same thing as well, did you? I mean, because it is a transition as well.
Yeah, and I think the reason I asked you that question because if I think about my own circumstances as well, like I've always changed things up. I've always gone out and I've done the thing. I think my family must look at me and always think that I'm crazy because I've always put myself forward for, jobs that I didn't think I'd get, or do a career transition within this moment, or relocate to Dubai and, all that kind of stuff. And my family are quite, they're working class, but they're also quite, I guess, cautious, but a bit like what you're saying as well. You kind of stay in your lane. This is what you do. This is what's expected of us, kind of thing. And I've always tried to push the limits, but I've never really had a strong sense of self-worth or confidence until, the recent years where I've really done that inner work and that self-development to build that. And I always think to myself, isn't it incredible what I achieve now without having that self-confidence and just the sheer determination and having that real drive and that why. And so that's why I do that question as well.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It's completely the same. That I think when you're at that point where there's no way out except moving sideways, which was what was happening with me. I was either get another legal job and be miserable or start something new. But yeah, for me, or go back home. And I was like, I don't want to go back to UK. It was like, So yeah, same. But I mean, even moving to Dubai, I just had the interview, got the job, flew over for the job interview, got the job, and just said I'm moving, and that was it. I didn't. Everybody went, "What? Where?" So I've always been crazy.
Now everyone wants to come.
Yeah. So how long have you been here?
9 years.
Okay.
So I think I probably got really mixed response. I had a really turbulent year before I moved here as well. I split up with my ex-husband, and then I got made redundant from my my kind of corporate career. I used to work in banking,
right?
So two significant things happened to me. And then I just thought, do you know what? I've wanted to move overseas for so long. I'm just going to do it. So I actually packed 2 suitcases and moved here without a job.
Oh, wow. You were even crazier.
I was even crazier. This is my opinion. But it's funny, isn't it? I look back at that as well and I think, oh my gosh, I don't really think I had that much self-belief, but I just had that drive, I just knew I wanted to do it and it was either going to work out or it wasn't, right? So you might as well, you got to be in it to win it, that kind of thing.
Well, that's the thing. Like, we're lucky that we always had a fallback. You could always go back home. Which is, I suppose, is a good thing. I'm grateful for that. But same. Just did it and then didn't think about it and then came here and went. And I came in 2005, so it was not as big as it is now. So
you must have seen so much change here as well during that time.
And it was a village, so everyone knew everyone. So if you went to a concert, you'd see everyone. Like, you'd see everybody you knew, even if you didn't like them.
I had that experience last night, though. I went to the Roxy Nafousi show.
All right.
And it reminded me, because I was like, this is remarkable. There are so many people in here that I know. And some people I knew were going, and other people I just bumped into. And I was like, it's actually quite nice, because I do think that Dubai has grown massively now. And I just, you look at the roads and all that kind of stuff. But to actually go there last night and have that experience, I was like, oh, in some ways it is still quite
that's nice. I went to a concert once and I was literally pointing with my friend going, I went out with him. And it was there were a lot of exes and it was when Tinder had started. So I was like,
oh no.
And my friends were like, what's wrong with you? I think I did that night. I was like, no, I can't do this anymore.
Funnily enough.
Anyway, we sort of digress, but it's always good. So we've been talking about confidence and belief and we had some strange self-confidence to get out here and do this, but what do you advice do you give to someone who's struggling with self-belief, especially after a life transition?
It's working out the why. It really is. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty and understanding, where do these beliefs come from,
right?
Because if we don't talk directly to the events that actually led us to setting up and building that belief, then we're going to still believe it, essentially. And what happens as well is that we continue to look for proof and evidence of that belief. I'm trying to think of a thing. If I got in the car now and I thought, I'm going to go out and it's going to be a terrible drive and I'm going to have an accident or something like that, then I'll probably start to drive, really shakily. And, I might be a bit more nervous. And then, before you know it, I've nearly had an accident and I've just, solidified that belief to myself again. Obviously very sort of simple and, example, but it is that kind of thing. And then if you think about the fact that if these are left undetected for years and years and years, which many of us are, I've had tons of limiting beliefs that I've had to work through, which stemmed from years and years of conditioning, whether it's my own conditioning or, our families as well, who, don't mean to, but, they instill certain ways of thinking. So it's being able to kind of go back to those real root causes and to examine them, and then to be able to work with understanding why did we build that belief. And it's not trying to tell ourselves that we were, foolish to do that or anything like that, because it comes from a place of self-love. But we slowly start to build an understanding of why that belief isn't actually true. And then we start to find reasons why over the years, actually, we've proven time and time again that it isn't necessarily true. So that would be my biggest piece of advice to someone who's going through confidence issues, anything to do with self-worth, is really getting to the root cause of it.
So, and it means going back to maybe even back to their childhood or when they were at school or whatever, isn't it? Because a lot of things happen then, but we don't realize until now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I try to, it depends on the individual, because obviously the work that I do is coaching. And so it's all about forward looking, but there is an element of that comes into coaching. We need to explore that to understand. I think if, someone I'm working with has a number of very complex beliefs, and, it may well be that they need to explore some additional therapies and things like that. But it really does depend on the individual. But it can be ever so complex. Absolutely.
That's just so interesting. It's fascinating. And you work with businesses as well to help employees, right?
I'm starting to. The reason being is because it's an area that I actually want to get into more and more. But because I come from a corporate background, and because I've worked in the HR space, I've worked in talent, I've also worked in the business as well.
Right.
And so, I think this kind of work and this building this kind of awareness within corporates could be really, really powerful too.
Right. And how would you think it will, because businesses, I mean, they're better than they were when I was in corporate. I mean, like they didn't even acknowledge mental health issues. But you know, how are you seeing them that they can better support employees with their identity kind of shifts or crises or whatever that they have?
I think two things that I would say organizations can always improve on, and it's not necessarily to say that any organization isn't doing this now, but I certainly think that it could be improved, is first of all having that awareness and being able to acknowledge that employees are going through certain challenges. When mums come back to the workplace, how is that impacting them? A lot of organizations have gotten better at managing this, but some have not. I think, also people go through all sorts of different challenges, as we've just discussed, right? People could be going through a divorce and, or somebody could be going through a divorce and they go back into the workplace. And I think, they might choose to make certain parties aware because they want people to know that they're going through it. But then an organization has that level of responsibility for being able to support them through that time as well. And I still think that there's an element of sort of, what's the word? Almost just suppression of the fact that that's even happening, and I also think that, training up managers to be able to encounter all of these different things from an emotional intelligence perspective is just so needed. They are the first line of support, right, to any employee. And they have to, and it's hard for them as well, right? I remember being in recruitment years and years ago and then managing my first individuals. And, I was a salesperson and I was a very selfish salesperson. I wanted to make money for myself. And then all of a sudden I had to take care of other people in a sense that I had no understanding of really, being in my 20s. People step into more senior roles when they're older as well, obviously, but you still don't have those core capabilities of managing people and dealing with such a variety of emotional issues and situations that somebody could be going through. So I think, those would be the two biggest things.
And I think emotional intelligence is still lacking with a lot of people, a lot of businesses. I mean, it was very lacking when I was in corporate, but I still see it when I work with people, that the lack of understanding about emotional intelligence. It's something that has to be looked at, really. Oh no, this is interesting. It's so fun. So this has been so interesting. I've just loved talking to you and finding out all this information. And it's resonated so much, I suppose, because we've both been in that corporate sphere and then we've moved into this and like helping people. So I'm sure people listening today will find it so useful. And how can they get in touch with you if they have any more questions or they want to book a session with you?
Yeah, of course. So I've got my website, which is www.carinaharvey.com. I have my contacts on there. I have my new course that I just spoke about on there as well.
Awesome.
And I also have my podcast, which is all things identity.
Okay.
So I have guests on every month, and they share all sorts of different stories in terms of, challenges that they've experienced to their identity and how they can come through, or how they have come through, and they've reached the other side of that as well. So yeah, all details of that are on my website, and then also on Instagram as well. I'm carinaharveyofficial.com. Not .com, it's official.
Yeah. Well, I will share all the details on the podcast in the description bit as well, so everybody can just click on stuff on that. But thank you so much for being on the episode. It's been so interesting and so much fun. And thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me as well. It's been so fun.
Hi all. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode with Carina and found it so useful for yourself. If you did, please share it and like and subscribe to the podcast. And thanks again for listening. And I'll speak to you next week. Take care. Bye.